U.S. forces launch explosive attack, Cartel's floating fortress. The headline became reality the moment the sky erupted over the southern Caribbean. At 10:43 a.m., without warning, a swarm of precision UAVs tore across the horizon, diving toward a cargo vessel disguised as a harmless freighter. In seconds, explosions rippled across its steel deck, fire, smoke, and ruptured bulkheads, marking the beginning of a strike the cartel never saw coming. But this was no ordinary ship. Hidden inside its 120-meter hull were 360 tons of chemical agents, 15,000 crates of cash, and 48 civilians forced into labor. A floating empire built on fear and now collapsing under American firepower. For years, this syndicate operated like a shadow army across the hemisphere. But today, the shadows finally burned. Before we continue, tell me this. Should operations this decisive become the new standard against transnational cartels? 10:43 a.m. The Caribbean looked calm enough to lull anyone into believing danger was far away. But beneath that blue horizon, something darker pushed northward, a steel monster weighing over 8,000 tons, stretching 120 meters, and hiding a fortune soaked in violence. Outwardly, it resembled a harmless cargo hauler. Inside, it carried 360 tons of chemical precursors, enough to create over 200 tons of crystal meth, a poison worth more than $680 million on American streets. And that wasn't all. Deep in the lower decks lay 15,000 sealed crates of cash, nearly $520 million in mixed currencies, the financial bloodstream of a criminal empire spanning from Venezuela to Central America. Guarding this floating vault were 180 gunmen, some barely trained, others veterans of cartel warfare, all convinced they were untouchable on open water. But the most chilling cargo was not the drugs or the money. It was the 48 civilians, kidnapped from fishing villages, forced to labor under armed watch. Their lives had become currency, and the cartel treated them as such. For years, the syndicate behind this vessel had acted like a roaming shadow army, leaving trails of disappearances, extortions, and violence across the hemisphere. Letting this ship slip past the horizon meant letting that shadow stretch further and letting chaos drift toward America's shores. And so, on this blistering morning, the United States made a decision. Not to wait, not to negotiate, but to strike first with precision, with coordination, and with a force the cartel had never imagined. Because today, the ocean itself was a battlefield, and the countdown had already begun. 10:58 a.m. The calm sea hid an operation engineered with almost mathematical precision. While the cartel vessel pressed forward unaware, unbothered, confident, the United States had already positioned nearly 270 operators across air and sea. Every move had been rehearsed. Every second mattered. The opening blow came not from warships or jets, but from the horizon itself. From a remote strip on Curaçao, the Pentagon launched 60 reconnaissance-strike UAVs, each no larger than a dirt bike, yet carrying 50 pounds of guided explosives. Flying only 100 feet above the waves, they skimmed so low that their shadows barely touched the surface. Their combined payload rivaled 3 long-range cruise missiles, but their accuracy was far more terrifying. At the same time, an unmarked trawler drifted within 7 nautical miles of the target. Hidden beneath its false floor were 210 Navy divers, equipped with next-generation rebreathers capable of 7 continuous hours underwater without a single bubble. They would be the blade in the dark, waiting below until chaos erupted above. The numbers were staggering. More than 270 American operators and UAVs, surrounding a ship defended by only 180 cartel gunmen. A tactical imbalance so extreme that the outcome, to any analyst, seemed predetermined. Yet, the mission depended on one thing: protecting the 48 civilians trapped inside. And that's where I want your thoughts. If you were the commander, would you strike fast or try to negotiate first? Tell me below. Because as the UAV swarm closed to strike distance at 11:13 a.m., the final pieces of the trap locked into place. What happened next would ignite the most dramatic assault of the entire operation, a moment you will witness in Chapter 3. 11:14 a.m. The silent horizon transformed into a storm of engineered fury. Without warning, the swarm of 60 UAVs dropped elevation simultaneously, diving until their rotors skimmed mere inches above the waterline. Their software initiated a synchronized attack pattern known internally as Falcon Spiral, a formation designed to overwhelm defenses before a single guard could react. The first detonation struck the vessel's aft tower, a precise blast from a drone, carrying 20 pounds of composite C-series explosives, enough to tear apart an entire weapons post in a fraction of a second. The shockwave rolled across the deck, shaking loose metal sheets and sending containers crashing against the rails. Within 40 seconds, more than 23 explosions smashed into the ship. Fuel drums ruptured, igniting plumes of black smoke that climbed 300 feet into the sky. Cartel gunmen, scattered and uncoordinated, fired blindly into the air, unloading full magazines at targets they could not see. Ammunition crates stacked along the middeck overheated and combusted, creating a chain reaction of secondary flashes that rocked the bow violently. By the 90-second mark, the UAVs bypassed all corridors marked as holding zones for civilians. Their targeting systems zeroed in exclusively on weapons lockers, lookout towers, and fortified positions. One drone penetrated a reinforced cabin used by cartel enforcers, and its detonation neutralized over 5,000 rounds of stored rifle ammunition in a single burst of fire and pressure. 11:16 a.m. The vessel's command grid began to fracture. Antennas folded under concussive force. Communication relays failed one by one. A final UAV slammed into the forward bridge, shredding the electronic hub and silencing the ship's long-range radio array worth nearly $4 million. Smoke consumed the decks. The air shimmered with heat. Gunmen stumbled from one compartment to another, unaware that their fate had already been sealed. The floating fortress, once a symbol of cartel dominance, now groaned under the weight of flames, ruptured steel, and collapsing structure. And beneath that chaos, unseen in the depths, 210 Navy divers began to rise. The aerial assault had done its part. Now, the battle was shifting below the surface toward the moment the cartel feared most. 11:17, 4 a.m. As the last UAV strike rippled through the upper decks, the sea itself began to fracture with movement. From every direction, 210 Navy divers surged upward like shadows erupting from the deep. Clad in matte black wetsuits, armed with suppressed compact rifles and carbide breaching tools, they clamped magnetic grips onto the hull's scarred surface. Within 90 seconds, the first assault teams breached the lower deck. The corridors were dim, trembling from the fires above, but the operators advanced with clinical precision. In the portside maintenance bay, a 12-man squad cleared 5 compartments in under 50 seconds, neutralizing armed defenders attempting to regroup near the ventilation junctions. On the starboard flank, breaching units used high-temperature plasma cutters to carve through a sealed bulkhead. A flash charge followed a burst of light and concussive pressure that dropped 7 cartel fighters before they even raised their weapons. The ship's internal layout, once a maze designed to confuse intruders, now worked against its defenders. Smoke-filled passages funneled them straight into the SEAL advance. The fiercest resistance came near the engine housing. There, heavily armed enforcers attempted to form a defensive perimeter. A firefight erupted through tangles of piping and steam lines. Over 250 rifle rounds were exchanged in less than a minute. 2 American operators were struck torso plates, absorbing the impact, yet both pushed forward, securing the compartment and shutting down the vessel's primary power feeds. But the mission's core objective lay deeper inside. 11:22 a.m. Team Bravo reached Cargo Hold 6, the place intelligence had identified as the labor detention zone. Behind reinforced doors, 48 civilians waited exhausted, dehydrated, chained to metal rails. The breaching charge ignited. The door collapsed inward, and the hostages saw, for the first time in months, not cartel guards, but rescue. Above them, the burning fortress continued to crumble. But below, the turning point had already come. 11:25 a.m. The battle inside the ship shifted from chaos to calculated dominance. With the hostages secured, assault teams fanned outward through the mid-decks, cutting off every escape route. Flames pulsed through ruptured ventilation shafts. Alarms crackled with intermittent static. The vessel, once the cartel's greatest asset, now groaned like a wounded leviathan. On the upper access corridor, a 12-man squad advanced toward the surveillance hub. Their objective was simple: blind the remaining defenders. The center was protected by reinforced plating and a locked steel barrier. But the SEALs carried precisely the tool for it: a twin-charge breaching slab. The explosion folded the door inward, and within 20 seconds, operators disabled every active camera feed across the vessel. The ship's eyes had gone dark. To the west side, near the cargo lifts, cartel fighters attempted a last stand. Nearly 30 gunmen, many disoriented from smoke and concussion, tried to form a firing line, but the SEALs attacked from multiple angles, using short bursts and stun devices. The clash lasted less than a minute. 9 defenders were incapacitated. The rest, surrendering as structure supports groaned above them. Below, in the engineering spine, another team uncovered something more severe: a hidden munitions cache. Dozens of crates, disguised as machine parts, held over 6,000 rifle rounds, fragmentation accessories, and improvised shielding plates. Specialists secured the site before heat from nearby fires could trigger a catastrophic chain reaction. By 11:33 a.m., American forces controlled nearly 80% of the ship. Communication systems were silent. Power grids were offline. The deck vibrated with each collapsing section as fire spread toward the bow. The floating fortress was no longer a stronghold. It was a collapsing shell, and the final phase of the operation was about to begin. 11:25 a.m. The battle inside the ship shifted from chaos to calculated dominance. With the hostages secured, assault teams fanned outward through the mid-decks, cutting off every escape route. Flames pulsed through ruptured ventilation shafts. Alarms crackled with intermittent static. The vessel, once the cartel's greatest asset, now groaned like a wounded leviathan. On the upper access corridor, a 12-man squad advanced toward the surveillance hub. Their objective was simple: blind the remaining defenders. The center was protected by reinforced plating and a locked steel barrier. But the SEALs carried precisely the tool for it: a twin-charge breaching slab. The explosion folded the door inward, and within 20 seconds, operators disabled every active camera feed across the vessel. The ship's eyes had gone dark. To the west side, near the cargo lifts, cartel fighters attempted a last stand. Nearly 30 gunmen, many disoriented from smoke and concussion, tried to form a firing line. But the SEALs attacked from multiple angles, using short bursts and stun devices. The clash lasted less than a minute. 9 defenders were incapacitated. The rest, surrendering as structure supports groaned above them. Below, in the engineering spine, another team uncovered something more severe: a hidden munitions cache. Dozens of crates, disguised as machine parts, held over 6,000 rifle rounds, fragmentation accessories, and improvised shielding plates. Specialists secured the site before heat from nearby fires could trigger a catastrophic chain reaction. By 11:33 a.m., American forces controlled nearly 80% of the ship. Communication systems were silent. Power grids were offline. The deck vibrated with each collapsing section as fire spread toward the bow. The floating fortress was no longer a stronghold. It was a collapsing shell, and the final phase of the operation was about to begin. By the time the smoke drifted away from the shattered hull, the truth was undeniable. In a single morning, the United States had dismantled a maritime empire built on fear, greed, and human suffering. More than 140 cartel operatives were taken into custody. 360 tons of chemical agents and $520 million in cash were seized. And most importantly, 48 civilians walked free from chains that had held them for months. What unfolded on the Caribbean waves was more than a military operation. It was a warning. A reminder that criminal networks, no matter how vast or violent, will eventually collide with accountability. Now the question turns to you. Do you believe this strike will force other cartels to retreat, or drive them to escalate even further? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next chapter shaping our world.